Greetings, vinyl community. It having been a couple of months now since I did a new finds video, I've got quite a backlog, so I'm just going to try to whirlwind through most of the stuff that I've managed to score over the past 2 months. And I'm going to start off with a segment of Around the World with Prog Rock, and start off in Italy with the third album by the highly experimental Italian band Aria, fronted by Greek vocalist Dimitrios Stratos, and this is their third album from 1975, Crack. Moving on to Germany, the debut album by Amandule 2, Phallus Dei, or God's Pecker. And this is a mid-70s reissue of the originally 1969 release, but this is the version that I had back in the day, so I'm really more pleased to have this than I would be with an OG copy. And on to France for Clearlight Symphony on the Virgin label, also from 1975. A lot of these albums will be. This is the debut Clearlight album fronted by keyboardist Cyril Verdeau, and a particular selling point of this album is that on side one he is accompanied by 3 of the core members of Gong, Tim Blake on keyboards, Steve Hillage on guitar, and Didier Malherbe, or Bloomdido Bad de Grace, on saxophone. We all know that Bloomdido Bad de Grace is a motherfucker yass. And on side 2, he has Gilbert Artman from Lard Free and Urban Sax accompanying him, along with a couple of other musicians. Now, originally, the Gong side was meant to be side 2, but he was encouraged, Cyril Verdeau being the he, was encouraged to flip the sides so as to promote the Gong connection. Staying in France for Magma, live album from 1975 or 76? 75. Magma Live, also released as Magma High, which is live in the Kobayan language that Magma invented. And still in France, moving on to the 80s though, 1983 release by Étrange Fou les Loups Blancs. The album is Les Sillons de la Terre. And Étrange Fou was associated with the Rock in Opposition movement, or RIO, so they were sort of fellow travelers with the likes of Henry Cow, Stormy Six, Univers Zero on Art Zoid, that lot. And speaking of Univers Zero, we'll go to Belgium for their last album from 2013, Phosphorescent Dreams. This is a brand new reissue on this interesting clear marbled streaky vinyl. And they are a very classically influenced band with elements of Stravinsky and Carl Orff in their music. Skipping over to the British Isles, specifically Northern Ireland, for Froop from Belfast. This is their second album, Seven Secrets, and Froop is a somewhat classically oriented or influenced prog rock band, and I tend to think of them sort of in the same breath as Griffin, having that lighter acoustic sound and moody blues, but really listening to this, they're heavier than I tend to think, particularly with that nice crunchy Hammond organ sound. You could easily imagine the Hammond organ belonging to John Lord in Deep Purple. But Deep Purple don't usually dress like this. Richie Blackmore does, nowadays at least. And skipping over across to England Sally Oldfield from 1978, her first solo album, I believe. Water Bearer. Sally Oldfield, of course, is Mike's sister. This is a really nice, low-key album. A lot of tuned percussion, marimba sounds. There's a long suite on side one based on Lord of the Rings, so that gives you a little idea of the kind of fantasy milieu that's taking place here. Very nice album. I actually found this at a thrift store. I never find anything in thrift stores, so that was a treat. Got that for $2 at the local SPCA outlet store. Staying in England, and in the year of 1975, I think. Recorded 74. 1975 release. Peter Hammill, Nader's Big Chance. This is an album that famously prefigures the punk movement that would be coming up soon. Peter Hammill, of course, from Van der Graaf Generator, takes on the persona of Ricky Nader and does a lot of simple, concise tunes after having established a solo career based on extended ruminations and very rambling and poetic pieces. This really is not entirely in that kind of punky mold. He does get quite poetic in the lyrics from time to time. He sort of forgets, I think, that he's trying to be this Yabo character that he's invented. But still a nice album. This features all of the Van der Graaf members from that period, and it is a prelude to the reformation of Van der Graaf, because they went right from this to doing the group albums God Bluff, Still Life, and World Record, after having been dormant while Peter Hammill got that first run of solo albums out of his system. And still in England, 2 albums by Curved Air, featuring the wonderful Sonia Christina on vocals, Francis Monkman on keyboards, Daryl Way on violin. Great prog rock band with a bit of a Renaissance-like sound. I'm referring to the band Renaissance, not the era. Due mainly just to Sonia Christina's vocals, but the instrumental parts go quite a bit more out there than Renaissance would. And the live album, Curved Air Live, this is actually a reformation of the original lineup. They had, after the second album and the third, Phantasmagoria, the band basically split up, and Sonia Christina put together an entirely new lineup, including Eddie Jobson on keyboards, and they made just one album in that configuration. And the band members, past and present, discovered that they had a big debt to pay off. So the original band got back together to make this live album and make a lot of money to pay off their tax bill. Interesting thing about this album is that Sonia Christina's voice is quite different. She's really gotten a lot more gravel to her sound, a lot more grit, and I like it. She has a much more pure sound on the studio albums prior to this, but she's channeling a little bit of her inner Janis, little Joplin-esque sound on there. Another goodie from 1975. This is Lol Coxhill and Steve Miller. No, not that Steve Miller. This is the one who played jazzy keyboards and was briefly in Caravan. Coxhill Miller, Miller Coxhill. One side composed by each, well, they actually both collaborate, but one side mainly features Steve Miller, one side mainly features Lol Coxhill. And particular interesting trivia on this is the first track, Chocolate Field, is actually the same tune as the Miller-composed track Songs and Signs on the Caravan album, Waterloo Lily. And having gotten into that Canterbury scene, first solo album by Elton Dean from Soft Machine. It's very jazzy, features Phil Howard on drums, who was briefly in Soft Machine, Mark Charig on cornet, and Neville Whitehead on bass, as well as Dean on alto, saxello, which is a sort of curved, semi-curved soprano saxophone, and electric piano. And finally, back to the USA with two reissues from Todd Rundgren's Zootopia. Is the first Zootopia from 1974. This is from Music on Vinyl, pressed on. This nice, I don't know if the streaks come through. It's meant to be a marbled blue vinyl. It's just got some white subtle streaks in there. Great album. Very long tracks. Frank Zappa meets Mahavishnu is how I describe it. And you couldn't get a lot farther from Hello, It's Me. And also from the this new batch of reissues, Raw from 1977. More song-oriented, a little more pop, but still two long extended pieces on side 2, one of which is the very proggy Hiroshima, and the other is the extremely silly and very lengthy Electric Fairy Tale Sing Ring and the Glass Guitar. And this is on orange vinyl. I love orange vinyl. I love the blue vinyl. It's very cool. And these are numbered, so I have copy number 000544. And this comes with the insert that you can cut out and make your own Zootopia pyramid if you feel so inclined. And now we can go briefly back to Europe, specifically Ossiach, Austria. Ossiach Live is a triple LP recording from a festival in 1971, and it's quite a selection of talent here. Weather Report is on here with a 1430 version of Eurydice. The Dave Pike set doing a jazz cover of Frank Zappa's Mother People. There's an 8-minute piece by Tangerine Dream. And Friedrich Gulda, the classical pianist, appears on here doing Mozart. Paul and Limpa Fuchs for the krautrock element again. There's Indian music. There's music from Zagreb, Bucharest. Madrigal choral music from Romania. North African music from Tunis. So quite a banquet. This is the Dave Pike set. And it's an odd configuration in that you've got an album in here, and then the third album comes out of the top of the middle. Moving on to the classical world, I picked up this album of Krzysztof Penderecki, the Dies Irae, or Auschwitz Oratorio, which is a vocal piece, of course, and that takes up side 1 of the album. Polymorphia and De Natura Sonoris make up side 2, both instrumental pieces. And this is on the Philips label. And I found this still sealed with a warehouse price sticker on it. For those not old enough to remember or not American enough to remember, the Warehouse was a big record chain in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Still sealed with the original price sticker on it, but a couple of little sealed for your protection stickers on both front and back, and I wondered what that was about until I took off the wrap and discovered they were covering up a cutout hole, so the album could be sold at the Warehouse at full price without revealing that it's a cutout. Cheap. Great, great piece. Turangalila by Mccann. And that takes up 3 sides of this double LP, the other side being November Steps by the Japanese composer Toru Takemitsu. And I had to have this particular version of Turangalila. There are a number of recordings of it out there, but this is the version that Frank Zappa once discussed, saying that, "I think November Steps kicks the shit out of Turangalila." Deutsche Grammophon recording from 1977, 2 pieces of Igor Stravinsky, Les Noces, or The Wedding, which is a piece that's, I think, influential on Magma, whom we heard of just a little while ago, and The Mass on side 2. Les Noces is an interesting piece, scored for vocal soloists, a choir, 4 pianos, and percussion. Found this, again, still sealed, old Richmond opera recording of Gilbert and Sullivan, Trial by Jury. I love Gilbert and Sullivan. It's funny. And another one, highlights from the operas Iolantha and The Gondoliers. Again, still sealed on Richmond. From 1976 on the Arhoolie label, J.C. Burris, One of These Mornings. Solo blues, just vocals and harmonica. And moving on to the world of jazz. Classic. Utterly classic. 1971. Joe Zawinul, self-titled Zawinul. This is essentially a sequel to Miles Davis's In a Silent Way, the title track of which was composed by Zawinul. And he does an extended version of it here, not extended in length, it's only 4:47, but including musical idea that's part of the composition that wasn't included in Miles' arrangement. Side 1 is dominated by a lengthy piece, Dr. Honoris Causa. He's got Herbie Hancock on piano, George Davis on flute, Woody Shaw trumpet, Earl Turbinton soprano sax, Miroslav Vitus and Walter Booker on basses, Joe Chambers, Billy Hart, and David Lee on percussion, Jimmy Owens on trumpet, and Hubert Laws on flute, Jack DeJohnette playing melodica and percussion. Brilliant album. Doing the around the world thing again, we just go from an Austrian jazzer to a South African jazzer, Dudu Pukwana and Spear. This is on the Virgin label. In the Townships. And as you can guess from that title, this has that very South African heritage to it. And the lineup is just stellar. Mongezi Feza on trumpet. I don't know how to pronounce the name of the tenor player. Bizo Munkikana. MNGQ. Those consonants don't flow. Anyway, Louis Moholo on drums and Harry Miller on bass. So Bizo, I don't know, but those other folks are really stars of that South African expatriate scene from the British jazz world. And this includes the Mongezi Feza composition Sonia, which was covered by Robert Wyatt on his Ruth is Stranger Than Richard album. A couple of albums featuring Steve Lacy. Saxophone Special. Compositions by Lacy for a quartet of saxophones accompanied by, instead of a rhythm section, a noise section, with Derek Bailey playing freeform guitar and Michel, I'm not sure how to pronounce, Vaisvitz on synthesizers, producing sputtering noises to accompany the saxes. And you can see he's got some scores on the back revealing how he's interested here in writing parallel parts in very close harmonies, but in harmonies that wouldn't be considered harmony in classical technique because they're clusters. They're going in stacked seconds. And oh yeah, it's a stellar collection of saxophonists with Lacy, Evan Parker, Steve Potts, and Trevor Watts. Potts and Watts. Also by Steve Lacy, with Andrea Centazzo on percussion and Kent Carter on bass, Trio Live. This is on Andrea Centazzo's Ictus label. And this was recorded in 1976. Anthony Braxton in the Tradition, Volume 2. Playing, as the title suggests, standards, including Body and Soul, Donna Lee, My Funny Valentine, Half Nelson, accompanied by the Spanish pianist Tete Montoliu, Niels Henning Ørsted Pedersen from Denmark on bass, and Albert Tootie Heath on drums. Ken Mccintyre, Hindsight, an album where over the course of 8 tracks, McIntyre plays 5 different woodwind instruments, plays alto sax, flute, bassoon, oboe, and bass clarinet. Number of standards on here as well. He does Lush Life, Body and Soul again, and Naima does Roundabout Midnight, and Sonny Rollins' Sunny Moon for Two. This is from 1974. A couple of Blue Note albums, both 1966, and this one does feature Ken Mccintyre. Cecil Taylor, Unit Structures. Besides Ken Mccintyre here playing alto, oboe, and bass clarinet. Jimmy Lyons on alto. Eddie Gale Stevens Jr. on trumpet, Cecil Taylor piano and bells, Henry Grimes bass, Alan Silva bass, and Andrew Surreal drums. And a lengthy, poetic bit of liner notes, kind of like, I think, Cecil Taylor's version of the kind of liner notes Bob Dylan used to write around 1965. Because they're pretty impenetrable. And Easy Walker by Stanley Turrentine, with Bob Cranshaw on bass, McCoy Tyner on piano, and Mickey Roker on drums. Next, 3 albums featuring the German multi-instrumentalist Günter Hampel. I think of Günter Hampel as primarily a vibes player. On this album, he plays bass clarinet, piano, vibraphone, and the compositions. It's from 1974 on Hampel's own Birth label, Gunter Hammill and his Galaxy Dream Band, Journey to the Song Within. He's accompanied here by 2 trombones, 4 woodwinds, bass and drums, the drummer being Sonny Murray, violin, and the wonderful, wonderful vocals of Hampel's wife, Jeannie Lee. Journey to the Song Within from 1974. From 1978, an album of duets between Hammill and Marion Brown. Marion Brown on alto sax primarily, Hammill primarily on vibraphone, although he also plays flute and percussion on this. So the title is simply Reed's Vibes. Reed's Vibes. Very colloquial. It's from 1978 on the Improvising Artists label. Also from 1978, this double LP on the Italian Horror label of duets between Hammill and Jeannie Lee. Next, 2 albums on the Impulse label, and just as I had 2 albums on Blue Note from the same year, these are both from 1968. The first is The Way Ahead by Archie Shepp. And this is a very 1968 cover, I think. Great musicians on here. He's got Gretchen Monker III on trombone. He's got Roy Haynes and Beaver Harris on drums. Walter Davis Jr. on piano, Ron Carter on bass, Jimmy Owens on trumpet. Also, they do a lengthy Frankenstein, which is a Gretchen Monker III composition. And also from 1968, one of the first posthumous releases by John Coltrane, actually credited to John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane, because Alice included 2 tracks without John, although the tracks with John Coltrane take up the bulk of the album. Early recording of Paul Bley and Ornette Coleman together with Don Cherry, Charlie Hayden, and Billy Higgins. Live at the Hillcrest Club, 1958. This is on the Inner City label, released in 1976. From 1977, Improvisations by the Globe Unity Orchestra, a 15-piece big band of improvisers, including Derek Bailey, Evan Parker, Gert Dudek, Paul Rutherford on trombone, Tristan Honsinger on cello, Kenny Wheeler on trumpet, Albert Bangelsdorf on trombone, Manfred Schuf on trumpet, Alexander von Schlippenbach on piano. Starts out with a very sparse sound, despite the fact that you've got 15 people improvising. They leave a lot of space between the notes and take the entire album side to really build up to a glorious noise. Eric Kloss Doors from 1972 on the Cobblestone label. Some nice, slightly fusiony saxophone in a quartet with Neil Creek on piano, Gene Taylor on bass, and Ron Krasinski on drums. And finally, a real classic. Swiss Movement, Les Mccann and Eddie Harris, recorded live at the Montreux Jazz Festival in June 1969, and featuring their epochal version of Compared to What, as well as an amusing moment halfway through the second track, Cold Duck Time, when the audience bursts into applause in the middle of Eddie Harris's solo. This concert was released on VHS video in the 90s. Unfortunately, it never came out on DVD, but the VHS exists. And finally being able to see the concert take place, it reveals that that round of applause was for Ella Fitzgerald entering the hall and taking her seat in the front row. So that's my haul for the last 2 months. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this hasn't been too long. I've got to stick all the little bits together and we shall see. Be well. Talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.